Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a tale darker than the shadows on your bedroom ceiling and older than the stones beneath the Parthenon. You're standing in the ruins of a forgotten temple, the air heavy with dust and distant thunder. Wind murmurs through the broken pillars and you swear, just faintly, you hear hissing. Not from snakes, not yet, but from time itself, curling through the cracks of history, whispering one name over and over, Medusa. You know her. Everyone does. A head full of snakes, a gaze that turns you to stone, a face carved into shields and horror films alike. A monster, or so you've been told. But maybe, just maybe, you've never heard the full story. Maybe you've only been told the version the victors wrote. And maybe tonight we're going to walk barefoot through the half-buried truth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it there? I'd love to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before the broken altar, and as the moon slips behind the clouds, you close your eyes and breathe. The air tastes ancient. Behind your lids, the world fades and a story awakens. Long before anyone had ever heard of a woman with venomous curls, there was a girl. Not just any girl. She was called beautiful even among goddesses, which, let's be honest, is saying something. Her name was Medusa, and at this point in history she had 0 snakes on her head. No deadly stare. No cave of horrors. Just a mortal girl with soft brown hair, walking through marble halls barefoot and free, her laughter echoing through Athena's sacred temple. You'd think being mortal in a place built for gods would be a disadvantage, but Medusa carried herself like she belonged. She was, in many versions, a priestess, devoted to the goddess of wisdom, war, and craft. Imagine that. A teenage girl, clever and dedicated, rising through holy ranks not because of divine blood, but because of her mind. Historians still argue whether she was born in Libya, on a distant island, or straight from a poet's fever dream. But the ancient texts agree on one thing. She was stunning. Like so stunning even the gods took notice. And when the gods take notice, that's rarely a good thing. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and general boundary issues, saw her one day and decided he wanted her. Not admired, not respected, wanted. And because he was a god and she was a girl, he didn't ask. The versions of what happened next shift like water, deliberately vague. Some say she fled, some say she begged for help. But eventually he cornered her inside Athena's temple, the most sacred space of all. What he did there? Well, even the sanitized versions agree it was not consensual. And yet, what happened next wasn't justice. It wasn't comfort. It was wrath. But not from Poseidon. Not from the temple guards. From Athena. Athena, the goddess Medusa had served faithfully, descended in rage. But not at the sea god. Not at the invader. She punished Medusa. Some say she did it out of disgust. Others say it was a strategic PR move to keep the temple pure. A few fringe theories suggest Athena wept while doing it. But either way, the punishment came fast and sharp. Medusa's beauty, her so-called sin, was stripped from her. Her flowing hair became a nest of snakes. Her gaze turned fatal. Her voice no longer carried prayers, only echoes. And just like that, she was no longer a girl. She was a monster. Let that sink in. You're not just watching history being rewritten. You're watching it be weaponized. You see a girl who was hurt, then blamed, exiled, and turned into the very thing people feared most. And yet, here's the twist. Athena didn't kill her. She made her untouchable. In a way, she made her safe. No one would ever get close enough to harm Medusa again. No man could pin her down without becoming stone. No god could lay a hand on her. It wasn't mercy, but it wasn't murder either. It was survival disguised as a curse. And so Medusa left. She vanished from the cities and temples and prayers, fled into the wilderness, out beyond the myths of heroes and into the realm of silence. Her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, joined her. 2 immortal women, fierce and wild, bound by blood and betrayal. Together they disappeared into a world that forgot what Medusa had been, and only remembered what she had become. But you remember. Tonight you do. The wind in the temple thickens. A shadow moves across the floor. You're not scared. Not really. But your breath catches in your throat. Because for the first time, you're not thinking of Medusa as a villain. You're wondering what it felt like to be turned into a warning sign, to wake up with snakes whispering your name, to live in the silence of betrayal. And this is only the beginning. You follow the sound of wind deeper into the memory of her story. You're no longer in a ruined temple. You're inside it as it once was. Columns unbroken, statues gleaming. And there she is, Medusa before it all unraveled. You catch a glimpse of her walking between marble rows, robes trailing like water, her hair catching bits of sunlight that sneak through the tall windows. She doesn't see you. She's lost in a thought, maybe a prayer, maybe a dream. The truth is, Medusa wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a rebel. She was devoted. Some say she took a vow of chastity to serve Athena. Others argue that vow was more ceremonial than personal. But either way, she was content in that temple. Safe, useful, holy. And she loved the goddess she served. That part too is often left out. You can't help but wonder. If Athena was watching, why didn't she stop Poseidon? Why let him desecrate her temple? Historians still argue whether Athena's hands were tied by divine politics, or if she let it happen for some higher purpose. But from Medusa's point of view, the betrayal must have cut deeper than the sea god's violence. It was the silence that followed, the lack of defense, the divine abandonment. You walk past a tapestry. It still hangs in this memory, high on the wall, untouched by time. It shows Athena with her shield, spear in hand, wise and powerful. It doesn't show Medusa anywhere. It never does. After the transformation, the temple forgot her. No one lit candles for her. No one mourned the girl who vanished. Instead, they feared the Gorgon. Because that's what she was now, one of three. A trio of sisters, two immortal, one cursed with a life that could never be normal again. You take a step into the wilderness. The marble gives way to rock. Trees twist up from the earth like warning signs. The Gorgon sisters made their home far from men, on a rocky island with no name, where cliffs dropped into a churning sea and storms liked to sit and sulk for days at a time. Here Medusa changed. Not just her appearance, though that too. Her skin grew pale, her eyes sharper. The snakes in her hair coiled tighter when danger came near. But more than that, she grew still. She became quiet. She had no one to talk to outside of her sisters and her serpents. She had no priestesses, no offerings, no voice in the world. And yet she survived. That's what they never tell you about monsters. They endure. They adapt. They build homes from ash and habits from pain. Medusa began sculpting statues. Not with her hands, of course. With her eyes. They were warnings, yes, but also expressions. Of fear. Of protection. Of what happens when you corner something that never wanted to fight. It's hard not to feel for her. You imagine her on a lonely cliff, the wind pressing her dress to her ankles, snakes quiet, staring out over the sea where Poseidon still rules. Did she think about revenge? Did she curse Athena's name? Or did she just learn to live with the silence? Some say she kept a garden of stone men, heroes who came for her head and failed. Others believe the statues were intruders turned warnings, left where they fell. And a few fringe scholars suggest the statues were deliberate, arranged in poses like art, each one bearing the expression of realization. The moment they understood the so-called monster was not the villain of the story. You duck beneath a stone archway now, and something hisses just above your ear. A strand of your hair lifts slightly, as if tickled by a breeze with 1,000 tiny tongues. But there's no fear. You know you're safe. You're not here to fight. You're here to listen. Stheno, the eldest, was the fiercest of the three, rumored to have brass hands and snake scales. Euryale, the middle sister, was said to wail like 1,000 birds whenever Medusa cried. The three of them weren't evil. They weren't scheming or cruel. They just wanted to be left alone. But the world doesn't leave things alone when it fears them. And so the hunters came. Over and over. Young men with sharp swords and sharper egos. Wanting to be remembered. Wanting to be sung about. Wanting to hold up a severed head and say, "Look what I've conquered." No one ever asked if she wanted to be left alone. No one ever considered that maybe her gaze was defensive. Maybe it was the only way she could stop the endless invasion. You step through the brush and find yourself in what looks like an old amphitheater. Cracked benches surround a stone floor. In the center sits a statue, partially crumbled. A man mid-step, his face caught in surprise, not terror. Like he didn't expect to see what he saw. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he expected a beast and found a woman. You sit beside the statue. The stone is cold but not unwelcoming. You wonder what his last thought was. Was it fear? Was it awe? Was it regret? Wind howls in the cliffs above you. Somewhere a wave crashes. The snakes are quiet now. They're listening. And so are you. The island shifts under your feet, not physically but through time. You feel the years pass like falling leaves, gentle but persistent. The world changes. Cities rise, empires fall, but Medusa remains on her rocky refuge, quietly surviving the myths that spread far louder than her own voice ever did. Word gets out. Not of a woman, not of a wronged soul, but of a monster with eyes that can freeze a man's heart, literally. Songs are sung in smoky taverns about her. Warriors sharpen their blades, imagining the glory of returning with her head swinging from their belts. But no one returns. Or if they do, they're never quite the same. You pace the shoreline of her island now. The rocks are slick with sea spray, and the mist curls like breath. You see marks on the cliff face. Deep scratches perhaps left by desperate hands or angry blades. She didn't always win, but she always outlasted. No hero ever learned her language. No god ever offered her peace. Just more swords. More shadows. And then him. Perseus. The golden boy of the Greek hero roster. Half god, son of Zeus because of course. And equipped with a checklist of divine gifts that would make any RPG player weep. Winged sandals from Hermes. A mirrored shield from Athena. A sword sharp enough to slice through reality. And a magical satchel to carry, well, you know. A head. Historians still debate whether Perseus was manipulated by Athena into targeting Medusa, or whether he just took the job because he liked a challenge. Either way, the result was the same. He arrived not to talk, not to understand, but to kill, and not even face her while doing it. That mirrored shield everyone praises him for? It was a tool of avoidance, a fear. He crept through her lair backward, using the shield like a rearview mirror. Tactical move, sure, but also one that robbed Medusa of the chance to see the end coming. You crouch near a crack in the stone. Maybe this was where she slept. Maybe this was where she dreamed. Some say she heard him coming, that her snakes hissed in warning, that she woke in time to stand just barely before the blade came down. Others believe she never stirred, that her death was silent, sudden. No final words. Noster. Just an end. It's oddly poetic, isn't it? For a woman cursed with fatal vision to never get the chance to use it in her final moment. Her eyes, the very thing that had turned her into a monster, denied even that last defense. Perseus did what he came to do. He severed her head, put it in the magic bag, walked away. Hero stuff, right? But here's the part the bards usually skip. From Medusa's blood, two beings were born. Not in the usual sense. This is Greek mythology after all. But from her decapitated body sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden warrior. A horse and a man galloping into legend. Yes, you heard that right. Even in death, Medusa created life. It's one of the weirdest and most powerful contradictions in mythology. A monster whose death gives birth to a symbol of divine beauty and a champion of justice. Historians still argue whether Pegasus was a curse or a gift, whether he symbolized her escape or her captivity, her freedom or her final surrender. You stare out at the sea now, imagining Perseus flying away, the Gorgon's head dangling in his satchel. The image is burned into art, painted on vases, etched into stone reliefs. The victorious hero, the conquered beast. But you know better now, because while Perseus returned to fame and adoration, Medusa's severed head never stopped working. Athena mounted it on her shield, the Aegis, using her image as a weapon, a divine branding. She turned her former servant into a permanent warning. You have to ask yourself, who really won? Medusa may have died, but her image outlived them all. Her power, her gaze, her fury, they didn't fade. They became tools of gods and emblems of armies. She became what so many women throughout history have become. A symbol repurposed by others, stripped of context and voice. You walk along the cliff's edge now, the wind tugging gently at your sleeves. In the distance, the sea rolls endlessly, just as it did the day Perseus left. Somewhere beneath the waves, Poseidon still stirs, untouched and unpunished. But up here, where the stories echo louder than the wind, there's only her. Her legacy. Her silence. And the creeping sense that maybe, just maybe, she's not gone. Not really. Because every time someone sees her image and feels a shiver, every time someone questions the version of the myth they were told as a child, Medusa lives a little more. She was never the villain. She was the warning. You sit now at the edge of her memory, legs dangling over a cliff that no longer exists, watching the tide erase footprints that were never made. The waves reach up and retreat again, as if trying to pull you into a truth that's always just out of reach. And from here you can almost picture her. Not the snarling monster, but the girl with the quiet eyes, watching from behind a curtain of serpents. But here's the thing. You can't undo a legend. Once a story takes root in the public imagination, it grows teeth. And Medusa's legend? It became something monstrous long after she was gone. You see, after her death, people didn't mourn her. They mythologized her, weaponized her, and worst of all, they simplified her. You walk into an ancient hall now, not a real one, more like the collective imagination of centuries. Its walls are covered in frescoes and mosaics, all depicting Medusa's face. In some she's terrifying, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream, snakes writhing like flames. In others she's serene, almost angelic, with snakes coiled gently like curls. The Greeks painted her as a warning. The Romans engraved her on armor. Soldiers wore her image not to honor her, but to scare their enemies. Medusa became a symbol of divine terror, something to behold but never understand. And every time someone etched her face into marble, the memory of who she really was slipped a little further into shadow. You reach out and touch one of the murals. It pulses faintly under your fingertips like a heartbeat. It shows Medusa facing forward, calm, poised, as if daring the viewer to see her for more than just the curse. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks truly feared her, or if they feared what she represented. A woman who could not be controlled. A mortal who defied the order of gods. A victim who turned her trauma into power. You step into a side room now, smaller, more intimate. It feels like a library, or maybe a memory vault. Here scrolls are scattered across the floor, covered in interpretations, translations, reimaginings. Ovid's version, Pindar's verses, 100 poets, each telling her story their way. Some show sympathy, some don't. Most skip over Poseidon entirely. But it's the silence between the words that tells you the most. You kneel beside a scroll that's been left open. It tells of Athena gifting the Gorgon's head to Zeus, as if it were nothing, as if it weren't once attached to a girl who prayed in her temple. There's a fringe theory in modern scholarship that Athena's punishment was never about cruelty, that it was a kind of twisted salvation, that she gave Medusa the power to destroy what hurt her, and made sure no one ever would again. Maybe not. But what's clear is that no one ever gave Medusa the chance to choose. Not her fate, not her image, not even her legacy. You rise and leave the room, heart a little heavier. Outside, the myth world continues. Statues stare blankly into the void. Tourists snap selfies beside replicas. Fashion designers stitch her face onto couture gowns. In recent years, she's made a comeback, but not as a villain, as a survivor. Feminist circles have embraced her. Artists have reclaimed her. Modern reinterpretations depict her not as the monster, but as the metaphor. A woman punished for beauty, for defiance, for existing. She has become the patron saint of vengeance, of transformation, of the voiceless. A canvas onto which the wounded project their strength. You find yourself on a subway now, don't ask how. Myths travel. On the wall opposite your seat, there's a graffiti tag of her face, crown of snakes and all, with one word beneath, enough. It's jarring in its simplicity. Raw. Defiant. You stare at it as the train rocks forward, lulled by the rhythm of modern life and ancient injustice braided together like serpents. And suddenly, the silence around Medusa feels less like a void and more like an echo chamber. She's not gone. She's speaking still. Through whispers. Through art. Through angry brushstrokes and trembling voices and midnight YouTube rabbit holes. The world may have tried to freeze her story, but people are starting to blink again. To question. To listen. And you? You're already ahead of them. You're not here to slay her. You're here to remember. You step off the myth train, yes, we're just rolling with that now, and find yourself back on the island. But things are different. This isn't the wild place of exile anymore. It's cleaner, curated, like someone tried to turn the story into a theme park exhibit. There's signage now. Neat little plaques describing the Gorgon's lair. A velvet rope marks where you can and cannot step. Medusa's story has become digestible. That's what happens, isn't it? We take something tragic, uncomfortable, powerful, and we sanitize it. Put it behind glass so it doesn't bite. Children's books now feature Medusa as a quirky villain. Animated films give her a comic relief role. She's not evil, she's misunderstood. The new narratives chirp, but then they still make her funny. What happened to her wasn't funny. You walk past a sculpture garden. The statues are new, smooth, and spotless. They depict stylized versions of Medusa at different stages: pre-curse, post-curse, mid-decapitation. There's even a coffee kiosk in the corner called Stone Cold Brew. You wince. The irony is too much. Too clean. Too cheerful. This is the version of Medusa designed for mass consumption. The one that strips her of the screaming and the sadness and turns her into content. And yet you pause. Because there, at the end of the garden, slightly off the paved path, is one statue that feels different. It's not perfectly shaped. It's not labeled. It's rough, almost incomplete. Medusa, hunched slightly, face obscured, arms drawn in as if to protect herself. No drama. No thanks. Just stillness. You step closer. The snakes aren't striking, they're resting. Her eyes, carved from raw stone, don't threaten. They plead. There's no glory here. No villain. No monster. Just a woman caught mid-moment, frozen not by magic but by sorrow. And suddenly you feel it. This isn't a sculpture made for tourists. This was carved by someone who knew. Someone who remembered that Medusa was once human. That she had hopes, fears, favorite places to hide from the summer heat. Someone who knew she laughed. That she cried. That she was real. Historians still debate whether Medusa was ever immortal at all. Some say she was always a Gorgon from the moment of her birth. Others argue her mortal origins were a poetic retcon to give her more pathos. But for you, here and now, those arguments miss the point. The truth isn't just in the facts. It's in the feeling. And the feeling here is unmistakable grief. You sit beside the statue and look out toward the sea, wondering how many people will ever see this version. How many will look past the Fong and fangirl iconography and see what's really at the core? A girl, a betrayal, and a choice that was never hers. You close your eyes and for a second you hear them, the snakes. But they're not hissing, not warning, just whispering, telling each other stories, laughing quietly. They remember better days. They remember the girl before the gods and blades and myths. They remember that she used to hum when nervous, that she liked the smell of olive oil and fresh linen. And you, sitting here, you become a part of that remembering. Because memory is resistance. When a woman's pain is turned into a symbol, when her body is turned into a weapon, when her name is twisted into a warning, the act of remembering her truth becomes an act of rebellion. You brush your hand across the statue's base. It's rough, unfinished. Like her story. Like all the stories of women erased, repainted, or monsterized by history. You wonder how many more are out there. How many Medusas lived and died in silence, their stories scattered like pebbles at the ocean's edge. And you realize you'll never look at her the same way again. Not in the paintings. Not in the memes. Not even in the mirror. Because we all have something of Medusa in us. The parts that lash out when cornered. That guard what's left when everything's been taken. The parts that learn to live with the curse. And find ways to make it look like a crown. The wind shifts again. The statue doesn't move. But somehow she seems lighter. As if knowing she's been seen. The air thickens again. Not with fear but with memory, like mist rising from damp stone. You leave the statue behind, but you can still feel her eyes on your back. Not watching. Just present. Like she knows you're not just another intruder with a blade, but someone who came to listen. You follow a crumbling path around the cliffs now, feet crunching on gravel that might have once been the steps of those who came before. Warriors. Priests. Poets. Opportunists. Each one drawn by a version of Medusa they thought was real. Each one hoping to prove something. And each one missing the point. Let's talk about those warriors for a moment, the ones who made Medusa into a quest item. Because it's not just Perseus who tried to turn her into a trophy. Generations of men built their fame by hunting monsters. Cyclops, minotaurs, hydras. But none of those beasts were once women. None of them looked back at you with eyes that asked, why? There's a shrine ahead, barely standing. Just a few pillars and a collapsed roof open to the sky. You step inside. On one wall is a crude carving barely legible. A snake coiled around a sword. It looks like a warning, or maybe a confession. This was likely built by a soldier who came here and never left. Perhaps he arrived with sharp steel and a sharper ego. Perhaps he caught a glimpse of her. Not the hair, not the power, but her face. Her sadness. And he couldn't do it. Maybe he stayed. Maybe he was turned to stone. Or maybe he dropped his sword and walked away. Historians still argue whether any of Medusa's victims ever came voluntarily, hoping to understand rather than kill. There's no record of such a visit. But records lie, or get burned, or conveniently fade. You sit on the shrine's edge and close your eyes. The snakes speak again just on the edge of hearing, like distant wind chimes in a storm. They murmur names, not famous ones, not kings or demigods, names forgotten, names erased. It's strange, isn't it? Medusa was never given the courtesy of a second chance. Not by the gods, not by the myths, but the very people who came to kill her. They got statues, songs, stars in the sky. And what did she get? A face on a shield, a brand, an eternal warning. And yet, something remarkable happened. She lasted. Longer than the heroes. Longer than the temples. Her story, twisted though it may be, survived. You trace your fingers across a broken pillar, feeling ancient grooves where others once knelt. Some out of fear, some curiosity, maybe even guilt. You wonder, if Medusa could speak now, not through paintings or statues or poems but truly speak, what would she say? Would she forgive? Would she still be angry? Or would she simply ask, why didn't anyone help me? Because that question, quiet and shattering, echoes in the bones of every myth like hers. She wasn't alone in being silenced. But she's unique in how loud her silence has become. You leave the shrine and descend a narrow trail winding down to the shore. The rocks are jagged here, unforgiving, and yet there's beauty in the chaos. Wildflowers grow in impossible crevices. Seabirds nest where cliffs should crumble. Life insists, and maybe that's the message. Maybe Medusa wasn't just about vengeance or trauma or tragedy. Maybe she was about persistence. Not the glossy #friendly kind. The real kind. The kind where you survive even when every part of the world wants you erased. You stop at a tidal pool, kneeling to look into the still water. For a moment you expect to see your own reflection. But instead you see her. Not snarling, not crying, just watching. And for the first time you don't look away. The reflection fades but the feeling lingers, like the ghost of someone brushing past you in a crowded room. You rise from the tidal pool, not shaken, not afraid, but aware. It's easy to fear Medusa when you don't know her. It's harder when you finally do. You make your way along the rocky beach, the sun now low and golden, casting long shadows like arms reaching out of the past. The waves roll in slowly, their rhythm oddly soothing, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. As you walk, fragments of broken statues dot the shore. A nose here, a hand there. All relics of heroes who tried to be legends. You stop beside a large slab of marble half buried in the sand. On it, a carving of Perseus holding Medusa's head aloft. His face is triumphant. Hers is blank. Erased. No snakes. No emotion. Just another symbol. And yet, someone has carved something new beneath it. Crude. Small. But unmistakable. A single word. Why? It's barely legible. Likely scratched in by a fingertip or a pebble. But it cuts deeper than any sword. Why her? Why the punishment? Why the silence? Why the centuries of being misunderstood, feared, twisted into something she never chose? You move past it and climb a small ridge where the view expands. See to one side, a vast stretch of ancient forest on the other. Here you imagine Medusa watching the world change. From gods to emperors, from bronze to steel, from myths to memes. Always watching, never speaking. But here's the thing about silence. it doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it's space, sometimes it's choice, and sometimes it's power. Because over time, Medusa's image evolved again. From cursed maiden to monster, then from monster to symbol, and now from symbol to mirror. Think about it. When someone invokes Medusa today, they're rarely thinking about ancient Greece. They're talking about power, about fear turned inward and sharpened outward, about rage that simmers beneath beauty, about what happens when you push someone too far. In feminist literature, Medusa has become the embodiment of female anger, the kind that isn't demure or palatable but earned. In art, she's the face of reclamation, snakes and all, staring boldly at the viewer, daring them to blink first. In fashion, she's everywhere, from Versace logos to tattoos, an icon no longer feared but worn. Historians still argue whether this modern resurrection of Medusa does her justice, or simply reshapes her for a new kind of marketing. Is she empowered now, or just rebranded? You don't know. But you do know this: she's no longer forgotten. You sit on the ridge, wind in your hair, the last of the sunlight warming your skin, and you begin to think less about the horror stories and more about her stories. Not the ones written by victors, but the ones whispered by women in shadow. The ones told in dorm rooms and late-night phone calls and therapy sessions. Stories of being punished for someone else's violence, of being blamed for what they wore, where they went, who they trusted. Stories that echo with snake-hiss rage and stone-cold stares. And suddenly Medusa feels closer. Not just a myth, not just a warning, but a sisterhood. She wasn't the only one cursed. She was just the first to wear it openly. You lie back now, eyes closed, the sky darkening above. Stars begin to appear, slowly, shyly, as if unsure whether they're allowed to shine tonight. You imagine Medusa among them, not as a constellation, though that would have been a far kinder tribute, but as a presence, a shimmer in the dark, watching over the cursed and misunderstood. And you're not here to slay, not here to collect trophies. You're here to witness, to remember, to pass her story forward, not as a tragedy, not as a warning, but as a truth. And that, more than anything, is how legends survive. Darkness settles now, not heavy but gentle, like a velvet curtain drawn slowly across the sky. You sit quietly on the ridge, feeling the day's warmth ebb from the rocks beneath you. Everything slows. Even the sea, once restless, seems to hush itself. It's as if the world knows you're in the middle of something sacred. You glance to your side, half expecting her to be there. Not the monstrous Medusa of textbooks, but the quiet one, the thoughtful one. Maybe she is. Maybe she's always been. You stand again and begin walking toward the forest's edge. The trees are tall and old, branches twisting in silent conversation. This part of the island feels untouched. No tourists, no shrines, no carved plaques. Just nature reclaiming space. And deep in this stillness, you begin to hear something else. Stories. Not in words but in sensation. Like the memory of a nightmare you don't remember dreaming. These are the stories of the others. The ones who didn't survive long enough to have their names carved into marble. The girls who vanished from myths. The women who were rewritten into villains. The monsters who were born from silence, not sin. You step into a small clearing where the moonlight pools like spilled milk. In the center stands a circle of stones, rough, unshaped. One for each forgotten name. You don't know who built this. Maybe Medusa did. Maybe it's just part of the land now. You kneel, brush moss from one of the stones, and sit cross-legged in the center. The snakes aren't hissing anymore. They're humming low and rhythmic like a song sung just for you. It's here that the truth becomes unavoidable. Medusa never asked to be powerful. She never set out to be feared or famous or immortalized in iron and ink. All she ever wanted was peace. But when peace was denied, when choice was taken, when even her own goddess turned away, what else was left? Only defense. And the thing about defense is, when it's strong enough, it starts to look like offense. That's what people saw. The consequences of what was done to her, not what she did. A reflection of their guilt, cloaked as fear. A mirror held up to their worst instincts. They turned her into a monster so they wouldn't have to look in that mirror too long. And that fear, it's old. It still echoes today. In the headlines that say, she was asking for it. In the whispers that question, but what was she wearing? In the instinct to shame the survivor and shield the powerful. The Medusa story didn't end in ancient Greece. It just changed clothes. You look around the clearing and realize it isn't empty. Figures begin to appear, subtle at first, outlines in the mist. Women. Some are tall. Some are hunched. Some are young, others old. But all of them carry something in their eyes. Not sadness. Not rage. Knowing. They've all been through it. Some version of it. And now they stand in a circle around you. Not to threaten, not to haunt. Just to say, we're still here. You close your eyes, overwhelmed but calm. This is what truth feels like. Not loud or violent, but deep and rooted. Like a forest that never needed to be seen to be real. Historians still argue whether Medusa's myth was meant to warn women, or to control them. Whether her story was a cautionary tale, or a confession dressed in symbolism. But here among the trees, no one's arguing. No one's debating. They're just remembering. And that, you realize, is the beginning of healing. Not the kind you find in potions or God's favors. The kind that comes when someone finally listens. You open your eyes and the figures are gone, but the clearing feels full. You're not alone. You never were. Medusa's silence was never empty. It was waiting for someone like you to carry the story forward, not to repeat the myths but to rewrite them. The forest behind you fades like a dream at dawn. You're walking now through a place that's not entirely ancient, not entirely modern, just suspended. A liminal space. One foot in myth, the other in memory. Ahead, a stone pathway appears under your steps, as if forming just for you. It winds through low ruins and tall grass, leading to what looks like an amphitheater carved directly into the hillside. The stage is cracked. The seats are overgrown. But this was once a place where stories were told aloud, projected to crowds, echoed in marble and blood. Tonight it's empty. Just you. And her. You don't see Medusa, but you feel her sitting in the shadows behind the stage, watching. Not performing. Not pleading. Just witnessing the way you've witnessed her. And so you take a seat. Front row. Ready to hear what's never been said. Imagine for a moment what it must have been like. To be Medusa post-transformation. No more temple. No more friends. No family. Except two sisters who couldn't age, couldn't die, and couldn't understand what it felt like to be mortal once and lose it. The loneliness would have been staggering. Days bleeding into each other. Her snakes likely became her only companions. Not just extensions of the curse, but creatures with their own personalities. Their own moods. Hissing when danger came near. Curling up softly when she cried. And yes, she cried. That's the part that always gets cut from the myths. The tears. Because monsters don't cry, right? But Medusa did. Maybe not often. Maybe not loudly. But every so often, when the weight of being everyone's nightmare got too heavy, she would sit among the statues and cry for the girl who was gone. You hear her now, not sobbing but breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Slow. Steady. She is near. You begin to think about the statues. Those poor, unlucky men frozen in time. The ones who came with blades and boldness and left behind only silence. Were they evil? Probably not. Were they misguided? Definitely. Did they deserve to be stone? Historians still argue whether Medusa's petrifying gaze was an act of defense or punishment. Whether her power was always active or triggered by fear. Some say the statues were accidents. She turned her head too fast, made eye contact by mistake. Others say she chose who to freeze, giving a silent final judgment. But here's a fringe thought. What if some of those men wanted to stay? What if they came not to slay, but to understand? And when they saw her truth, they couldn't handle it. What if they turned to stone not from magic, but from realization? What if the horror wasn't her face, but their own reflection in her eyes? Because that's what Medusa really was. Not a monster. A mirror. A way to see what you'd rather ignore: your cruelty, your ambition, your cowardice, your privilege. And when you saw it clearly, too clearly, you froze. Back in the amphitheater, a breeze picks up. The stage lights up with moonlight, just enough to see her silhouette. Barely there, but undeniable. She stands in the center, still as a statue herself. No snake snapping. No cape billowing. Just a woman. A woman who has been watching everyone tell her story but never handing her the pen. And then she moves. Slowly. Gracefully. She steps forward and sits cross-legged at the edge of the stage, mirroring you. The silence between you isn't awkward. It's ancient. Her snakes rest on her shoulders like tired guardians. Her eyes don't glow. They don't threaten. They search. And you don't flinch. You meet her gaze. Not through a mirrored shield. Not through someone else's words. But directly. And you see it all. The temple. The betrayal. The silence. The rage. The power. The peace. You don't need to say anything. She knows you've seen it. All of it. And in this strange space, half ruin, half dream, you feel something pass between you. Not forgiveness, not a curse. Just recognition. The kind that says, I see you. I know what they did. I know how hard it's been to carry the weight of being misunderstood. And then without a word she disappears. Not violently. Not like a ghost. Like a memory finally released. You sit alone again. But not empty. You are now a bearer of her story. Not just the tragedy or the magic or the drama, but the truth. And with that truth comes responsibility. Because the next time someone calls her a monster, or dresses her in cliches, or uses her name like a punchline, you'll know better. You'll be better. Because you met her. And you listened. You rise slowly, the amphitheater behind you fading into the mist. But Medusa's presence clings to your senses like the scent of old stone after rain. Quiet, grounding, impossible to forget. You descend a slope now, the path shifting beneath your feet like memory. The air is cooler, and the stars seem to multiply above, constellations blinking with silent urgency. Somewhere far off an owl calls. A snake rustles through leaves, not to threaten, just passing by. The world has stopped trying to frighten you. It's strange how stories change you. Not just what you know, but how you feel it in your bones. You came to hear about a monster. You found a woman. And now you're thinking about how many monsters are just women whose stories were told wrong. You arrive at a weathered stone bench under a fig tree. The fruit hangs low, ripe just out of reach, like truth always seems to be. You sit and remember how Medusa's story began with worship. She wasn't born into wrath. She was chosen, or maybe more accurately, devoted. Athena's temple. The vows. The pride. The sense of purpose. And then, in one violent instant, all of that was gone. People still debate whether Athena's punishment was fair, whether she acted out of rage or strategy. Some scholars frame it as a symbolic detachment, the divine goddess severing ties with messy mortal consequences. Others defend her, saying the transformation was a gift in disguise, a tool of empowerment cloaked in cruelty. But here's the catch. None of these interpretations asked what Medusa thought. You think about that a lot. How often women's pain becomes a platform for debate. How suffering becomes theoretical, academic, discussed by men in sandals and scrolls, who never had to survive the things they wrote about. It makes you wonder who else was rewritten. How many other stories across time and culture were peeled apart, reassembled into something palatable. Medusa just happens to be the one who got famous for it. You stand again, walking slowly now, deeper into the grove. The tree branches curl overhead, forming a kind of tunnel. And through that tunnel you spot another figure, a statue this time, but not stone. Bronze. Shining, weathered, and fierce. Medusa, not as the slayer or the slain, but standing tall. One arm lifted. One snake coiled around her neck like a shawl. Her eyes are calm, not weaponized, just watchful. And in her hand? Not her own severed head, but Perseus's. You stop cold. Not because it's violent, it isn't. It's not gory or grotesque. Just reversed. The roles flipped. This is not the Perseus victorious you've seen in museum halls and glossy textbooks. This is Medusa claiming her narrative. Not because she wants revenge, but because she refuses to be silenced any longer. You walk around the statue slowly, fingers brushing the cool bronze. This was sculpted recently. You can tell by the style. The sharp lines, the posture, the subtle feminist defiance baked into every angle. You read the inscription at the base. They made me a monster, so I made myself a god. You step back. Let that sit. Because it's not about divine powers or myths anymore. It's about reclamation. About agency. About refusing to be the story other people wrote for you. And you realize standing here that Medusa never got to write hers. So others are writing it now. Sculpting it. Reclaiming it. painting her not as the first villain of womanhood, but as its earliest witness. This is happening all over the world, you know? From TikToks to college essays, from graphic novels to protest signs, people are returning to Medusa, peeling back the layers of legend to find the girl beneath. And in doing so, they're not just seeing her. They're seeing themselves. The survivor. The silenced. The blamed. And suddenly you see Medusa's myth for what it always was. Not a cautionary tale, but a mirror held up to power. You walk away from the statue slowly, your shadow stretching behind you like a second self. You don't feel haunted. You feel recruited, not into battle, but into remembrance. And from now on, whenever you hear someone call her a monster, you'll smile quietly, because you know the truth. She wasn't born with fangs. She was given them, and she learned how to bite back. You follow the path until it opens into a quiet, windswept field. The grass sways like seaweed, and the moonlight spills across it in long silver sheets. It's peaceful here, eerily so. The kind of peace that comes not from rest, but from exhaustion. The earth itself feels like it's exhaled after centuries of tension. You sit in the grass, gaze upward, and notice something odd. The stars. They're brighter here. Not in that poetic way people say when they're away from city lights, but truly brighter. Clearer. As if you're not just looking at stars, but at old eyes looking back. Watching. Remembering. And in those constellations you find shapes. Not of heroes. Not of gods. But of her. There's no official constellation named after Medusa. Not like Perseus, who got a starry badge for swinging a sword. But if you connect the dots just right, there she is. Head turned. Hair a shimmer of twisting lights. Watching forever, even though she was never given a seat in Olympus. It's funny, isn't it? The gods who hurt her got temples. The man who killed her got praise. And she got myth. But not the flattering kind. The cautionary kind. The don't be like her kind. Still here you are. Looking at the sky. Seeing her in the stars. And realizing something else. She's winning. Not loudly. Not vengefully. But quietly. Enduring. And you begin to realize why the story still matters. Why it's not just about injustice or mythology or even Medusa herself. It's about pattern recognition. Because her story has happened over and over again. Different names. Different centuries. Same script. The woman shines. She's clever. Bright. Brave. Then she's seen. And something terrible happens. Then she's blamed. Then she's punished. Then she's rewritten. And by the time the world remembers her again, she's unrecognizable. Historians still argue whether Medusa's tale is based on a real woman. A priestess, a local legend, a symbol. Some say she was invented to warn girls about disobedience. Others say she was a response to societal fears of female autonomy. A cultural pressure valve disguised as myth. But that's the thing about pressure valves, they leak. And eventually they break. You lie back in the grass now, arms folded behind your head, the wind curling around your ankles. The snakes are quiet again, almost purring, as if they know this part of the story needs silence. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because what comes next is yours. You're the storyteller now, the one who saw beyond the image, beyond the shield, beyond the sharpened gaze. You met her, not the Gorgon but the girl. You heard her silence, and you chose to fill it with memory, not fear. And now, you carry her forward, into conversations, into questions, into art, into the way you see yourself and others. Because this wasn't just Medusa's story. It was a map, a trail of broken statues and whispered warnings leading you back to a single truth. Power doesn't corrupt, but pain, when denied voice, can become armor. And armor over time can look a lot like fangs. You close your eyes again and whisper a small promise to no one in particular. I'll remember you. And the wind shifts, as if she heard. Dawn teases the horizon now, a thin line of pink brushing against the stars, nudging the night to move along. But you're not quite ready to leave. Not yet. You rise from the grass slowly, your joints stiff from stillness, but your mind sharper than ever. You've been wandering this world of memory and myth for hours, and somehow you don't feel tired. If anything, you feel more awake than you have in a long time. You head toward the edge of a bluff that overlooks the sea, your quiet companion through this entire journey. The waves continue their endless task, breaking and retreating, as if trying to wash away stories etched into the shoreline. You wonder, if Medusa ever stood here, what did she think about? Did she think of the temple? The moment everything turned? Did she ever hope someone might come not to slay but to stay? It's easy to romanticize her now, isn't it? To see her as tragic, poetic, misunderstood. But maybe that's just another trap. Another myth dressed in softer clothes. Because Medusa doesn't need pity. She never asked for sympathy or soft lighting or cinematic backstories. She just wanted the truth. And the truth is this: she survived. Longer than the temples. Longer than the empires. Longer than the men who wrote her down with shaky hands and sharpened biases. And she survived in forms they never expected. In protest signs. In art exhibits. In the fierce tattoos on the backs of women who refused to be small. In the quiet rage of a girl who's told to smile more. In the bone-deep sigh of a woman who's finally had enough. She's in all of them. Not just as a symbol, but as reminder. A mirror still intact. You reach the bluff's edge now. There's a stone bench here, half covered in lichen, facing the sea. You sit, wrap your arms around your knees, and let the rising sun spill across your face. From here you can see the whole island, and something strange happens. It starts to shift. Not physically, but symbolically. That shrine from earlier? It fades. The kitschy souvenir shop? Gone. The graffiti, the statues, the curated narratives, washed clean by morning light. All that's left is her. A presence. Not a monument. Not a brand. Just Medusa. Breathing. Waiting. And for the first time you realize. She doesn't need you to rewrite her story. She needs you to carry it. To hold it with care. To whisper it to those who only ever saw the shield. Because it's easy to forget that behind every myth, there was once a heartbeat. A choice that was never given. A voice that was taken. A name that was stolen. But if enough people remember, if enough people see past the monster, they might stop turning women into warnings. They might stop calling anger dangerous and silence noble. They might start listening before the curse. And that might be the closest thing to justice Medusa will ever get. You stand. The sun is higher now, burning off the fog, revealing the honest shape of the land. And you feel something inside you shift too. Lighter. Stronger. More honest. You don't need to look back as you leave. She's not behind you. She's walking with you. You follow the curve of the path inland now, leaving the sea behind. Not out of forgetfulness, but because you no longer need to see it to feel her presence. She's in the rhythm of your steps. In the way the trees lean to listen. In the quiet conviction that truth, once recognized, does not disappear. The land here becomes rougher, broken by roots and rock. It's harder to walk, but you don't mind. You're used to the discomfort now. You expect it. And something about that feels fair. After all, Medusa's story was never meant to be a smooth ride. You pass through a grove of olive trees, ancient twisted things with trunks like old hands. Olive trees were sacred to Athena, which makes their presence here ironic. Or maybe deliberate. The gods loved symbols. They used them like punctuation. And yet here, surrounded by Athena's trees, Medusa still lingers. That's something the myths never counted on. The persistence of presence. They tried to erase her, silence her, frame her. But her spirit outlasted them. Because it turned out, fear was a poor historian. And truth, no matter how quiet, tends to echo. You pause beside one tree in particular. Its bark is scarred. Not by weather but by human hands. Names carved in spirals, dates long since faded. You run your fingers across a heart that was once fresh, now cracked with age. The people who left these marks never knew you'd be here, decades or centuries later, thinking about a Gorgon. But you are. Because Medusa has that effect. She finds you in moments of doubt, in flashes of rage, in silences that stretch too long. She whispers, not fight, not forgive, but remember. You reach a small rise and see laid out before you a garden. Not wild but carefully tended. Rows of herbs. Stones placed in neat rings. Someone built this long ago or just last week, you can't tell. But it's not a shrine. It's not a monument. It's a sanctuary. A space of peace, of healing, of rest. And suddenly it strikes you. This is what she never got. Not safety. Not time. Not healing. She got power instead. And while power can protect, it cannot soothe. It cannot restore. It can only hold the world at arm's length until you forget what softness feels like. You kneel by the rosemary bush and crush a few sprigs between your fingers. The scent rises sharp, clean, alive. It fills your lungs and clears your thoughts. You wonder if Medusa ever smelled rosemary. If anyone ever braided herbs into her hair before the snakes. Probably not. But you imagine it anyway. Because reclaiming stories means filling in the silences. Not to rewrite the pain, but to humanize it. To make space where there once was only erasure. You sit for a while in the garden, not meditating, not mourning. Just being. And as you sit, the world around you feels less like a myth and more like memory. You see flashes. A girl laughing by candlelight. A mirror turning slowly in a goddess's hand. A priestess kneeling with ink-stained fingers. A sister screaming into a storm. A woman centuries later reading the old stories and asking, what if they lied? Historians still argue whether Medusa deserved her fate. Whether she broke a vow, or was simply caught in the gears of divine egos. But sitting here in this stolen garden, the debate feels small. Pedantic. Because justice isn't about technicalities. It's about truth. And the truth is, she didn't ask for this. She didn't choose the gaze that killed. She didn't choose to be remembered by the blade that ended her. But now you choose to remember her fully, not as a monster, not as a martyr, but as a person, a presence, a name. The garden hums around you. Bees drift lazily through the air. Somewhere nearby, a stream babbles to itself, as if reciting forgotten verses. And you feel Medusa closer than ever. Not haunting, not hurting, just there, quiet, whole, unburdened for once by your understanding. You leave the sanctuary slowly with one last glance over your shoulder, not out of fear but respect. This space wasn't meant to be owned or posted about. It was a gift, a whisper of what could have been, had the world been different. Had the gods been kinder. Had anyone stopped to ask Medusa what she wanted. The path winds downward now into a shadowed valley. Trees grow taller here, their branches knitted into a cathedral canopy. Light filters through in beams, catching dust in the air, and everything feels like it's holding its breath. This is the part of the myth no one ever visits. The aftermath, the quiet, the what now? Because most stories end at the decapitation. That clean, dramatic finish. Hero victorious. Monster vanquished. Cue the triumph music. Roll the credits. But myths don't end. They linger. They echo. They settle into the bones of the world and grow roots, whether you notice or not. And Medusa's myth? It didn't stop with her death. In many ways, that's when it began. You cross a shallow stream, the water cold and clear. As you walk, you remember what happened after Perseus took her head. He used it, repeatedly, to defeat sea monsters, to turn enemies into stone, to win wars that had nothing to do with her. He weaponized her again and again long after she was gone. And then when he was done, he handed her off to Athena, who placed her head on her shield as a badge of divine authority. The ultimate irony. Athena, who cursed her, now wore her face like armor. You pause on the bank of the stream, heart heavy. How many times had Medusa been used like this? As punishment, as propaganda, as protection, never as a person. You wonder, did she know? Did her soul, wherever it went, feel that continued violation? Or did she finally rest? Historians still argue whether Athena's shield was meant to honor Medusa, or to dominate her. Some call it a tribute, others a final insult. But you don't need a footnote to understand what it means when your face becomes someone else's weapon. You walk further into the valley, where the trees part into a glade. In the center is a small still pool, black as ink, perfectly smooth. No fish, no ripples, just reflection. You kneel beside it, and for the first time you see yourself. All this time you've been walking through her story, but now in the stillness you realize you've been walking through your own silences, your own scars, your own moments of being misunderstood, misrepresented, mistaken for something you weren't. And in that mirror you understand why Medusa matters. Because she isn't just a symbol of female rage or mythological injustice. She's a threshold, a moment, a choice. Do you keep letting others define you? Or do you reclaim the story? Do you carry shame? Or do you carry knowing? You stare at your reflection and let the questions settle. Let the water accept them. You don't need answers right now. Just the presence of the questions is enough. You rise and step away. Not because you're done, but because you're ready. Ready to leave the myth behind and step into what comes next. Not the shield. Not the statue. Not the softened, palatable version. But the real Medusa. And the real you. Intertwined. Forever. The sky is lighter now, brushed with soft lavender and the blush of coming morning. Birds begin to murmur in the trees, first one then another, until the forest hums gently, like it's breathing along with you. You've reached the end of the path, though no sign says so. You just know. The air has that feeling, like the final page of a book already curling in your hand. You walk into a wide open clearing. Grass rolls out like a green sea, dewy and fragrant. In the center stands a circle of stone markers, simple, smooth, no names carved on them. Just empty slabs, silent as the centuries they've endured. And yet, you recognize the space. It's a graveyard. Not for bodies, but for truths. The ones history buried. The ones too inconvenient to print. The ones too dangerous to say aloud. You approach the nearest stone and rest your palm on it. It's cool. Grounded. You imagine Medusa standing here watching the centuries unfold, watching people get her story wrong over and over again. But she never spoke. Not out of weakness or fear. She was done explaining herself. Done justifying her existence. And yet she remained. In stone and story and silence. Not because she wanted to. Because she had to. Because someone needed to. You walk the circle slowly. At each stone a memory rises. Not just hers, others like her. The voiceless. The rewritten. The villainized. And as you walk, you realize you've joined them. Not as a victim. Not even as an ally. As a witness. And witnesses carry weight. Because once you've seen the truth, you can't pretend you haven't. You can't laugh at the caricatures. You can't quote the myths without questioning them. You can't look at power without asking, at whose expense? Historians still argue whether Medusa was meant to be feared, or if the fear was simply a projection of the culture that created her. But here among the stones, you understand the deeper truth. They weren't afraid of her. They were afraid of what she represented. Uncontrolled power. Unapologetic survival. Unkillable memory. You take a final turn around the circle and return to where you started. The sun is just cresting the trees now. The first rays touching the stones, casting long shadows that stretch like bridges to the past. You take a breath. And for the first time you speak to her. Not aloud. Just inward. Quiet thank you. Not for the myth. Not for the warning. For the witnessing. For surviving long enough that someone you could finally listen. You leave the clearing not with answers but with awareness. Of how stories shape us. How power distorts truth. And how remembering someone fully, honestly, even painfully, is the closest thing we have to justice. And somewhere, deep in the roots of the old temple ruins, or in the stars above, the snakes stir. Not in warning, in recognition, because you saw her. And that's enough. Word count. 1095. Wind down 300 words. Now take a breath. Let the images soften, the cliffs, the stone, the mirror-still pools of memory. Let them blur at the edges like morning mist curling back into the trees. You don't need to hold on to every detail now. Just let them settle where they belong. You've walked through time tonight, not just across an island, but through the long tangled myth of a woman reshaped by fear and silence. You've seen the shrine and the statue, the garden and the grave, and you've felt what most never do. That Medusa's story was never about snakes or stone. It was about survival. And now, in the hush of early dawn, you carry that knowledge with you, not as a burden but as a gentle flame, something to keep close when the world feels loud and wrong, when you're told who you are by someone who's never asked, when you feel erased or edited or made into something you never agreed to be. Remember her, not the monster, the woman. And remember this too. The stories we inherit aren't always the ones we have to keep. Sometimes they're the ones we're meant to change. So breathe in. Let your body relax. Let your mind drift. Medusa is no longer alone. And you're no longer unaware. Sleep well now. The monsters are only myths. And the truth? The truth is finally waking up.